Welcome to my garden, to the GinGee GoodEarth program, July 25th, 2020. GinGee GoodEarth production, Roman numeral 8, Part 18A, Director, GinGee GoodEarth, regarding the American peoples, a universal history of the United States of America will be reviewed. The picture that I'm showing is a medicine bag, my family's medicine bag, dated in the 1700s, and it's the Waihapatha, the phoenix, and a black bear standing above it, all woven in very tiny bead work on black ribbon fabric. And it's in the book White Buffalo Spirit. And that book can be purchased at Etsy.com. Wild Trout Lily is the store name. Your host today, Gretchen Schmidt, and I want to show you a photograph. I hope that you can see this. But this is a picture of a wall mural that I made for JCPenney's company, and I won first place in the national contest on inclusion and diversity at JCPenney's. And I'll try to put this in my picture show, and I hope that you can get a good picture of that. There's me. And I'm putting this video together for the big, terrific challenge today. It's a day in the life of people from all over the world. And it's called
I'd like to make a film with
Make
you.
a Movie.
On July the 25th, take your camera.
It's called Make a Movie with Ridley Scott and Kevin McDonald. Film your day, July 25th. So that's what this day's about, and I tried to make it a little more special with giving you some informationals on my family's Iroquois, French Iroquois family medicine bag with the phoenix and the famous black bear of North America, Canada. And I'm going to go over some beekeeping tips and beekeeping information. And I will be reading pages 223 up to chapter 7 in the book A Universal History of the United States of America. So, without further ado, I'm going to read an excerpt from my book, Honey for All. Time to make decisions for helping to save the honeybee from extinction. There lies a cherry tree fork among the Pennsylvania forest woodlands. A path not traveled frequently, a rare black cherry tree stands upright, reaching for the sky, and is not yielding. Just as this cherry tree fork provides a view of strength and power, we need to dedicate, strongly advocate, and provide healthy and sustainable environments in which honeybees can thrive. Plant a fruit tree, herbal garden, vegetable garden, and other flower garden beds. Be ecologically sensible about helping to save the honeybee. Just think, the honeybee is the only insect that produces food eaten by man. Help save the honeybee. And this is from the book that I wrote, Honey for All, and it's much more than a honeybee story. It includes poetry, recipes, and honey beekeepers' history, and it helps promote beekeeping in the state of Pennsylvania. Try this sometime. The Ruby Red Rose Honey Cocktail. A half cup of honey, 3/4 cups of water, 6 cups of fresh ruby red grapefruit juice, strained from 6 grapefruits, 2 cups of sparkling rosé chilled. Bring honey and water to a boil in a small saucepan, stirring to combine. Remove from heat and let cool. Combine juice and honey syrup in a pitcher. Add rosé to pitcher. Divide the juice among the ice-filled glasses. And that's called a Ruby Red Rosé Honey Cocktail. And today, this morning, I saved all my grapefruit rinds because I've been eating a lot more grapefruit because I want to get the benefits of quinone in my nutrition. And it's very popular today because of the fact of the COVID-19 2020 epidemic. And in order to increase and bonify your diet with healthy, good foods, sometimes you have to go through extraordinary measures. Now, for a while there, you could not buy soda water with quinine in it. And sorry for the interruption. I also am playing music that I helped produce with the Bavarian flute and the Navajo drum that was gifted to me, and also the rain stick. And so that's going to play too in the background. And again, my GinGeeGoodEarth programs are not scripted. I put a storyboard up in my mind that I would like to play certain things, and then we put it together so that we can have good conversation and fun, because all my GinGeeGoodEarth programs, videos, which can be found on YouTube, are fun-filled, educational, and artistic. And I have a store name, Etsy.com, Wild Trout Lily, where you'll find my books, Honey for All, White Buffalo Spirits, and Pittsuburgh, Victoria, and All That Is Gilded is also on the Wild Trout Lily Etsy store website, Etsy. They call it Etsy. And I have one more thing to read in the book Honey for All, which I thought would be great for today. I wanted to be inspirational to the masses of people that will be tuning in to the July 25th program that will be put on YouTube. So this poem I wrote many years ago, I'd say around 1999, and I wrote it for a friend to help inspire him to have a better lifestyle in life and better thoughts, and give you a positive feeling of how great the human body is, and how you can nurture yourself and uplift yourself and live life with joy and every morning wake up with a song in your heart. But the poem is called Gold Honey. Keep on filling. What you've got is gold honey. Keep on filling. It's hard thing to do. If you're mad, be mad. Use it in your work and use it in your art. If you're feeling all right, then use that feeling in your work. You've got it right here. Touch where your heart is, located on your left side of your chest. In your heart, right here, gold honey. Everyone has it, but few know of this individual gold honey asset. Others do not know how to discover it. It's a primal instinct, and it has to be exercised, exerted, revealed. You have to live life with the gold honey feeling. Go through life experiences of feelings, pain, joy, love, desire, good, happy, bad, struggle, conflict, passion. How many emotions do others have? Question yourself and others. They're numb, shallow surface cares. They may not be touched by life dramatics until hardship hits. So understand, you feel it. Shallow people suppress it. Don't suppress your gold honey feelings. Don't let others tell you how. Be a flower. Art and prosperity of feelings flower. And what flowers exert is gold honey. And again, I wrote that poem also with my own struggles in regards to hardship, raising children on my own, 3, in fact, and then still being able to direct and produce the productions for the Pittsuburgh Victorian Gibson Girls and Jopai Music Festival, and teach communities since 30 years of work helping, assisting with wellness, nutrition groups. I'm the founder of the American Heart Association in Beaufort, South Carolina, and of course the Pittsuburgh Victorian Gibson Girls, major theatrical vintage productions. I wrote the play on Bearing Fruit, where Nellie Bly, 26 years older than Evelyn Nesbit, teaches you 21st century survival skills. And the history is fabulous. These two women of their time were so ahead of themselves. So we can learn from them. And then Jopai Music Festival was more of a country, western musical troupe, but it also educated you on Jopai weed. And Jopai was an Indian yarb man, or herb man, yarb spelled with a Y. And he discovered a cure through the plant that healed many of the adventurers coming over from Europe, settling on the coastlines of the East Coast, and he healed them from pneumonia and other ailments with Jopai weed. And the name of the plant was something different back then, and the colonists called the plant Jopai weed, which is a 9-foot trumpet-shaped floral, pink florals that grows from July to the end of September, and it has medicinal purposes. And the Indian yarb man, his name was Jopai, and so therefore they named the plant after him. And the famous Jopai weed plant is growing all through the Americas, and especially northeastern side of the United States and the east coast of Canada. And it's a great plant. It's very beautiful. It makes beautiful bundles of color and joy. So I encourage you to learn more about Jopai weed. The next group of information I wanted to go over is the mood of the country. And I have every edition to this magazine, newspaper called Waste Watch. And It's a really great paper. And let's see if I can get the cover. And so I wanted to talk about the mood of America, because right now, you know, government waste watch, the price of peanuts are too high priced, the new HUD scandal, news for CAGW donors, too much for health, pension quicksand, and look at, there's a dragon, and then I have my dragon teapot that I got from Holland. So dragons seem to be a part of our history, and they're in the movies and so forth. And you can research about dragons. But foremost, my opinion is I find that liberty is one potential for success in life. Let me repeat that again. Liberty is one's potential for success in life. And I believe in liberty, and I do believe that America is one continent, country that has a constitution which exemplifies and supports liberty, freedom, pursuit of happiness, and justice for all. The 19th Amendment has allowed women to vote. At one time, women couldn't vote. And this alone is a wonderful thing because it creates equity among men and women. And again, we have the First and Second Amendment, freedom of speech, and religious freedom. Those are very important. Other countries do not have a constitution that provides so much freedom. And again, along with freedom comes law and order. And so we also have our Bill of Rights. Okay? And I'm going to read an excerpt from a brand new book that was given to me as a gift, 1491, The New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus. And I just want to read this excerpt from the book. Here, though most United States historians have stopped the otherness that colonists reacted against, military foes and cultural foes, 1981, the most important role Indians played in the evolution of the United States was as military foes and cultural foes, to be the otherness that colonists reacted against. The whole colonial experience of trying to solve a related series of Indian problems had much to do with giving the colonist an identity indissolubly linked to America. He wrote, collectively recoiling from the native population of the Americas, Europeans learned how to become a new version of themselves. Here, though, most United States historians have stopped. They have seen the Algonquin and Iroquoian-speaking societies they encountered and the Northeast as too different from British societies to have exerted lasting changes on them. How could these hierarchical, acquisitive, market-oriented, monotheistic, ethnocentric newcomers have absorbed ideas and customs from the egalitarian, reciprocal, non-capitalistic, pantheistic, ethnocentric natives? The suggestions that the culture could have an impact on the American character is naive, according to Alan Tater of the University of California at Davis. The suggestion that the European culture could have an impact on American character as naive, according to Alan Taylor of University of California at Davis, because it minimizes the cultural divide separating consensual natives from coercive colonists. Perhaps so, but then the skeptics must explain why the cultural divide between Indians and Spaniards, who did deeply influence each other, was so much smaller. The historian Francis Jennings has wondered how Iroquois propagandists and he calls them, can cite Benjamin Franklin's words about Indians, as I just did, given his oft-expressed contempt for ignorant savages. But people believe what they want to believe in the face of logic and evidence. The argument is baffling. It is like claiming the European Americans were not culturally affected by African Americans because they reveled and oppressed them. Cultural influence is difficult to pin down in documents and concrete actions. Nevertheless, it exists. In 1630, John Winthrop led what was then the largest party would-be colonists from Britain, some 700 people, to Massachusetts, where they founded the city of Boston. As the expedition was underway, the deeply religious Winthrop explained his vision of what the new colony should become: a city upon a hill. The city would be ruled by the principles of the Pilgrim's God. Among these principles, the supreme deity loves each person equally, but he did not intend them to play equal roles in society. God Almighty, in his most holy and wise providence, hath so disposed of the condition of mankind as in all times some must be rich, some poorer, some high and eminent in power and dignity, others mean and in submission. Winthrop's ideal community, that is, was not the place of equal opportunity, nor a place where social distractions or social distinctions were erased. The mean circumstances of the poor were in all times part of God's plan, and could not be greatly changed if poor people got too far behind. The rich were supposed to help them. The social idea was responsible adherence to religiously inspired authority, not democratic self-rule. The reality turned out to be different. Instead of creating Winthrop's vision of an ordered society, the Pilgrims actually invented the ruckus, ultra-democratic New England town meeting, a system of governance. The Dartmouth historian Colin Calloway observes that displays more attributes of Algonquian government by consensus than of Puritan government by the divinely ordained. To me, it seems unlikely that the surrounding Indian example had nothing to do with the change, excepting that indigenous societies influenced American culture opens up fascinating new questions. To begin with, it is possible that native societies could also have exercised a malign influence. This is why the subject is not necessarily pious or romantic primitivism. As the Oxford historian Philippi Fernandez Armesto had complained, look to the southeast, where Taylor had noted, colony societies sustained a slave system more oppressive than anything practiced in Europe, and the slave owners relied on Indians to catch runaways. There, too, the native groups descended from Mississippian societies were far more hierarchical and autocratically ruled than the Algonquin, Iroquoian-speaking groups of the Northeast. As Galley had documented, indigenous societies cooperated fully with the slave-trading system, sending war captives to colonists for sale overseas. In the Northeast, by contrast, the Huron and the Wendat, Huron, and Haudenosaunee either killed or, more common, adopted captives. Involuntary servitude, though it occurred, was strikingly rarer. On the map, the division line between slave and non-slave societies occurs in Virginia, broadly anticipating the Mason-Dixon line that later split slave states from free. The repeated pattern doubtless has to do with geography. Southeastern climate and soil favor plantation crops like tobacco and cotton, and southern colonists' preference for slavery presumably reflected their different ethnic, class, religious backgrounds. But can one readily dismiss the different Indian societies who lived in these places? And if not, to what extent are contemporary America conflicts over race the playing out, at least in part, of cultural divide that came into being hundreds of years before Columbus? Okay, and Columbus is in the news because they're putting graffiti on Columbus, who was an artisan on navigation and had great abilities for, managing the ships, the vessels, to bring over the adventurers from Europe to the Americas and to settle along the eastern coastline, and also to document and draw maps. So he was also a person that was an artist that drew maps and wrote about the topography of the Americas. And he had great talents. And also he had to have the ability to write proposals to the king and queen to get the funding to come to the Americas for exploration. Now, in the description of my GinGee GoodEarth videos on YouTube, the main reason why they came to the Americas was to search for gold. Okay, so that was the impetus for traveling from Europe. It was also for religious freedom, but mainly the expense of sailing vessels to the Americas was to prosper from the resources that are found in a new land. And again, in Europe, they had indentured servants, and many people were not allowed to own their own property, and they were slaves and so forth. And also you couldn't practice your own religion. You had to always follow the religion of the kingship on what they believed at that time. So, and again, geography played a role in whether or not plantations needed slaves in the South to grow the cotton and the tobacco. And up north, you didn't need a plantation in such magnitude of food production. And again, because of the mountainside, the Allegheny Mountains created a divide from the north and the south. And again, you'll have to read more about it. And I'm hoping that we learn all about the American dream. So I wanted to show this. This is fun. I enjoyed talking about all this. And again, everything's up for discussion. And if you need to write to me, just email me at GibsonGirls with the S at mailman without the man.com. And it's GibsonGirls@mail.com. And that's the email for all my work and productions. And again, I direct Pittsuburgh, Victorian, Gibson Girls. And here we have a wonderful portrait of a Lakota man. And this was done by Winashi. And she was Sitting Bull's great-great-great-granddaughter. And I have that in the picture show. And I have a lot of nice pictures in the picture show. So I want to get finishing up this excerpt from the book, 1491, New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus, written by Charles Mann. It's his second edition. So again, with geography, southeastern climate, and soil favor plantation crops like tobacco and cotton, and southern colonists' preference for slavery presumably reflected their different ethnic, class, and religious backgrounds. But can one readily dismiss the different Indian societies who lived in these places, and if not, to what extent are contemporarily American conflicts over race was playing out, at least in part, of a cultural divide that came into being hundreds of years before Columbus? To my eye, historians have to grieve over the destruction of the American statues that reflect our history. And again, someone made those statues, and they should not be in any way plundered and torn down and dismantled and ruined. They're pieces of art. They're works of art. And I just heard on the radio the administrator advisor for Dorseyville Native Americans that he was also an art teacher, and he also suggests that this is a wrong act of violence against the community, the history of America, and should not be happening. Okay, we have to learn from our history. We must learn from our past, and I'll leave it at that. So I'm going to get back to the read. And if not, to what extent are contemporary Americans' conflicts over race the playing out, at least in part, of a cultural divide that came into being hundreds of years before Columbus? To my eye, historians have been puzzled readily to dismiss such connections. That's New York City in the picture. Let's see, the picture show's still going, so we'll keep going too. Some of the reluctance may be holdover from a long dormant intellectual battle in which academics and activists squared off about the purported British role in the United States Constitution, a battle that left a bad taste in the mouth for both sides. Part of it may be a simple reluctance to credit the culture of liberty held so essential to the identity of the United States could have so many different forebears. Think of Bernard Colwyn, a distinguished historian who studied the thought of the framers of the Constitution, claiming that Enlightenment philosophers derived their ideas of freedom from Newtonian physics, when a plain reading of their writings shows that they too, many of their illustrations of liberty from indigenous examples. So did the Boston colonists who held their anti-British Tea Party dressed as Mohawks when others took up European intellectuals, books and histories, images of Indian freedom exerted an impact far removed in time and space from the 16th century Northeast, for much the same reason as their confreres in Boston. Protesters in South Korea, China, and Ukraine wore Native American makeup in, respectively, the 1980s, 1990s, and the first years of the century. So I know that Iroquois Nation played a key role in the design and writings of the American Constitution. So that gives you proof of that through this reading. So accepted now around the world is the idea of the implicit equality and liberty of all people that it is hard to grasp what a profound change in human society is represented but it is only a little exaggeration to claim that everywhere that liberty is cherished, Britain to Bangladesh, Sweden to Cape May, people are children of the descendants of earth and their neighbors. Imagine, here let me now address non-Indian readers, somehow meeting a member of the humanity of 1491. Is it too much to speculate that beneath the swirling tattoos, asymmetrically trimmed hair, and bedizened robes, you would recognize someone much closer to yourself, at least in certain respects, than your own ancestors? Okay. So there's a word that I'm trying to avoid here because I can't pronounce it. Haudenosauneee. And so I replaced it with other words. But sometimes that happens. And as I said, you should start with my video 1 and go all the way through the 57 videos that I have explanations for my objectives. Okay, I'm definitely going to need a flashlight. So, okay. For many days on page 123, we want to start. As the reduction of Ticonderoga and Crown Point was a favorite object with the northern colonies, they made early and great exertions for carrying it into effectual execution. And again, I'm reading A Universal History of the United States of America. Besides the assistance which they gave to the reduction of Louisburg, they furnished about 10,000 troops for the northern expedition. These, in conjunction with between 6,000 and 7,000 regular troops, had, by the beginning of July, got into Lake George more than 1,000 boats and battle axe, a fine train, artillery, provisions, and everything necessary for an attack on the fortress of the enemy. On the 5th of July, the army consisted of 15,390 effective men, embarked in 900 ships and 130 whaleboats for Ticonderoga. Besides, there were a number of rafts on which cannon were mounted to cover landing of the troops. Early next morning, they landed at the north end of Lake George without opposition. The army formed in 4 columns and began their march for Ticonderoga. But as the woods were thick and the guides unskillful, the troops were bewildered, and the columns, falling in one upon another, were entirely broken. In this confusion, Lord Howe, advancing at the head of the right center column, fell in with the advanced guard of the enemy, consisting of the battalion of regulars and few Indians who had deserted their advanced camp near the lake, and were precipitately fleeing from troops, but had lost their way, and were bewildered in the same way as they were. The enemy discharged and killed Lord Howe the first fire. The suddenness of the attack, the terribleness of the Indian yell, and the fall of Lord Howe threw the regulars who composed the center columns into general panic and confusion, but the provincials who flanked them and were acquainted with their mode of lightning stood their ground and soon defeated them. The loss of the enemy was about 300 killed and 148 taken. The loss of the English was inconsiderable as to numbers, but in worth and consequences it was great. The loss of the gallant officer, Lord Howe, was irreparable. From the day of his arrival in America, he had conformed himself and made his regiment to conform to that kind of service which the country required. He was the first to endure hunger and fatigue, to encounter danger, and to sacrifice all personal considerations to public service. While he was rigid in discipline, by his affability, condescending, and easy manners, he conciliated affection and commanded universal esteem. Indeed, he was considered very much as an idol and life of the army. The loss of such a man at such a time cannot be estimated. To this the provincials attributed the defeat and unhappy consequences which followed. As the troops for 2 nights had slept little, were greatly fatigued, and needed refreshment, the general ordered them to return to the landing place, where they arrived at 8 in the morning. Colonel Bradstreet was soon after detached with a strong corps to take possession of the sawmill, about 2 miles from Ticonderoga, which the enemy had abandoned towards the close of the day. The whole army marched to the mill. The general, having received information that the garrison at Ticonderoga consisted about 6,000 men, and that a reinforcement of 3,000 more was daily expected, determined to lose no time in attacking their lines. He ordered his engineer to recontrive the ground and entrenchments of the enemy. It seems that he had not so approached and examined them, so obtained any proper idea of them. He made a favorable report of their weakness and of their facility of forcing them without cannon. On his groundless report, a rash and fatal resolution was taken to attack the lines without bringing up the artillery. The army advanced to the charge with the greatest intrepidity, and for more than 4 hours, with incredible obstinacy, maintained the attack. But the works where the principal attack was made were 8 or 9 feet high, the impregnable even by filled pieces, and for nearly 100 yards from the breastwork trees were felled so thick and so wrought together with limbs pointed outward that it rendered the approach of the troops in great measures impossible. In this dreadful situation, under the fire of about 3,000 of the enemy, these gallant troops were kept without the least prospect of success until nearly 2,000 were killed and wounded. They were then called off. To this rash of precipitate attack succeeded a retreat equally unadvised and precipitate. By the evening of the next day, the army had retreated to their former encampment at the south end of Lake George. And I got to put a flashlight on top of my head. So you just saw the picture. And you're watching the picture show. Did you see the book 1984? I had to read that book, 1984, in 7th or 8th grade. I'm just changing my light situation. I cannot see this book sometimes. So the new words that I learned today are intrepidity, obstinacy. There's some tricky words here, especially if you just see them for the first time. So we're going back to Lake George. Nothing could have been more contrary to the opinions or more mortifying to the feelings of the provincials than this whole affair. They reviewed the attack up upon the lines without the artillery as the height of madness. Besides, it was made under every disadvantage to the assailants. The enemy's lines of great extent, nearly 3/4 of a mile, on the right of the common path towards South Bay, and especially on the north, they were weak and of little consideration. In both these quarters they might have been approached under the cover of a thick wood. The army was sufficiently numerous to have attacked the lines in their whole extent at once, or at least in very great part of them, and to have drawn their attention to various parts of their lines. But unhappily, the attack was made upon a small part of them, where they were far the strongest and most inaccessible. At no attack of feints were made in other parts. The enemy were left to pour their whole fire on a small spot, while the whole army could not approach it. Besides, the general never approached the field, where his presence was indispensably necessary, but remained at the mill, where he could see nothing of the action, nor know anything, only by information at a distance of 2 miles. By reason of this, the troops, for hours after they should have been called off, were pushed on to inevitable slaughter. So the word fence, F-E-I-N-T-S. See, that's a new word for me too. And so I'm going to look it up. So, but F-E-I, okay. There it is. Okay, I'll put it on volume. So fent, it's actually pronounced font. And how do you like that dragon? Did you notice that was made in New York City out of handbags, but did you notice the tail is a scorpion's tail? So, I mean, that symbolizes something. That's diabolism. Okay, they said fence.
Faint.
Oh, okay, faint.
Faint.
Okay, so feints. So the sentence says, as no attacks or feints were made in other parts, the enemy were left to pour their whole fire on a small spot, while the whole army could not approach it. Okay. We're coming back down to the bottom of the paragraph. There were eminences which commanded all the works of the enemy, whence he might have infiltrated their front, and poured destruction on their whole lines and camps. Next paragraph. The provincial officers were therefore clearly of the opinion that there was the fairest prospect of success, notwithstanding their misfortune, could the expedition only be prosecuted with energy and prudence. But the general took his own way, without advising with them, and appeared to retreat with the utmost perturbation. The general never had been high in the estimation of the provincials after the loss of Oswego, but now he sunk into contempt. They generally called him Mrs. Nabbycromby, imported the petticoats would much better become him than breeches. To repair. Oh, that's cute, because I have a poem. So we might as well read it. I have a poem. So I have a poem that's kind of cute. Ode to a Fair Maiden. Ode to a fair maiden, quoth Weydon, hair the color of gold, skin as white as snow, lips the color of a rose, eyes as blue as the sky, beauty. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were a guy. So that I just found that. It's kind of cute. So we all love each other, right? And humanity, one for all, and equality. So, you know, gender is a big issue these days. So here, instead of saying Abercrombie, Anacrombie and Finch, remember that store? They generally called him Mrs. Nabbycromby, importing that petticoats would much better become him than breeches. To repair, as far as might be, the disaster of Ticonderoga, the general detached Colonel Broadstreet with 3,000 provincials on an expedition against Fort Frontenac. With these troops, Broadstreet sailed down the Ontario, landed within a mile of the fort, opened his batteries, and in 2 days forced this important fortress to surrender. And I tell you, this is brutal. These battles, these wars, that's why war is hell. It is brutal. And you have to have some kind of, heart of stone, and you may call that being brave, but when your life is on the line, and death is near the gate, believe me, these men had to have a lot of fearlessness about them. While these events were taking place in the Northern Department, General Forbes, who had been appointed to command the expedition to the southward, was advancing with great activity and labor to the conquest of Fort Duquesne. About 8,000 men had been assigned to this service. In June, the general